Human behavior has always been a mystery. Why do people do what they do? Why do they react one way when we expected something else? How do we learn to understand, connect with, enroll, engage, align with people most effectively? Hi, I'm Christine Comerford, founder of Smart Tribes Institute, and welcome to our Smart Tribes Crack the Behavior Code podcast. In each episode, you'll learn practical, easy-to-use tools to better understand and change human behavior. These tools will help your team outperform, out-engage, outsell the competition. In other words, to become a smart tribe. Oh, and you'll find these tools super helpful in your personal life too. Let's go. I stalked Steve Jobs and how to get a meeting with any VIP. I was a young CEO and I needed answers. Steve Jobs had them. There was only one thing to do. I sent a FedEx letter. Then I sent another. Then I started calling. Then I sent another FedEx and called some more. Finally, after 7 FedExes and 12 phone calls, Steve's assistant said he wanted to talk with me. You keep sending FedExes and calling, so let's end it. What do you want? Steve said with his characteristic charm. I want 5 minutes of your time. I really admire your accomplishments, and as a young CEO, I have a few questions no one else can answer. Bring a timer. I will. Oh, and thanks. He had already hung up. My surface agenda was to get 5 minutes of advice, watch how Steve's mind worked, bask in his brilliance, and then have a breakthrough. My subterranean agenda was to find hope again. It was the early 1990s, and I'd left my engineering post at Microsoft. I was depressed and wanted to really know why we weren't changing the world as fast and as well as we could. Windows hadn't deeply changed people, hadn't really helped. Wasn't technology supposed to do that? All I saw were the limitations of software, hardware, and peripherals. I'd left feeling frustrated after years of 12 to 14-hour days, pounding code that refused to become bug-free. Remember those chunky white metal kitchen timers from your childhood? The ones with the dial and the ticka, ticka, ticka sound and the bing ringer? Well, 2 weeks later, timer in hand, I shook Steve's hand and set the dial for 5 minutes. We're at a dark conference table at Next. He is slouching at the head of the table to my right. Ticka, ticka, ticka. I won't bore you with the questions I asked. They were mere prompts to get Steve talking. What I do want you to know is that during this conversation, which was over 18 years ago, Steve shared his vision of the future, and it was glorious. He described a world where our computers were so seamlessly integrated into our lives that everything we needed was easily accessible. He described the iPod, iPad, iPhone, nearly 2 decades before they hit the market. I watched how his brain moved without limitation, from what might enhance a customer's life to what that would mean to them, to how they would benefit, to how this would change the world. He didn't question that whatever he envisioned could and would be created. He didn't agonize over whether current limitations would hold him back. I could feel my brain expanding. It felt so big around Steve, so open, so limitless. I was tracking him. I was following his twists and turns and expansions. I felt smart around him, and it was glorious, and it was freeing, and ticka, 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 ding. My 5 minutes were up. I rose to leave, bowing a little as I backed away. I'm not done with you yet. Sit down. And zoom, we were back in brain expansion mode, flying into the future, the wind blowing our hair, everything possible, everything important. And we needed to create it. It was our destiny. 45 minutes later, Steve released me. Sitting in my overheated car in the sunny Redwood City parking lot, my head bursting with the remarkable, complex, complete vision of Steve Jobs in my head. I made a commitment. I would no longer see barricades. Stumbling blocks would now become stepping stones to something better, something to crawl over or walk around. Previous limitations would now be a mere triviality, at worst a slight inconvenience. There were insanely great things to create, and we were here to create them, and that's all there was to it. All thoughts to the contrary were irrelevant. And that's how I still live today. Want to meet your Steve? Here are 3 steps to get a meeting with any VIP. Step number 1, find out what causes they care about. Write a half-page to a 1-page genuine letter about their specific accomplishments you admire. Offer 5 hours donation of your time to their favorite nonprofit for 5 minutes of their time. Request a meeting in person if you can, versus phone. Step number 2, send your letter via FedEx. Call to ensure it was received. Bond with their executive assistant. Only call first thing in the morning or last thing in the afternoon. They're more likely to answer then. Step 3, repeat step 2 until you get a meeting. If for some reason this doesn't work, give the letter to them by hand at an event they're speaking at. Then repeat step 2 until you get a meeting. In my over 30 years in business, the approach above has worked for me again and again and again. The key is the letter. Be authentic, heartfelt, compelling, care. Make it a work of art. Years later, after my father had died from pancreatic cancer and my uncle Ed then had it, my mother asked me to call Steve's office to compare his treatment to my uncle's. Perhaps we could improve Ed's odds. The woman who answered in Steve's office hesitated for a moment. Looked up my name, I suppose. I'm not really sure. Then we talked through Steve's versus Ed's situation. Unfortunately, the news wasn't good. Ed's cancer was more aggressive. He died 6 months later. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for bringing me back to my faith in technology and innovation and possibility. Oh, and sorry I stalked you.
Thanks for joining me on this episode. Every listen, every share, every review helps others form their own smart tribes where teams are engaged, happy, and optimally performing. Together, you and I can help millions of people crack the behavior code in their organizations, families, and communities. I invite you to take 2 minutes and head over to smarttribesinstitute.com to discover more about how to form a smart tribe. See you there, and please tell your friends.